Yes. So welcome, good afternoon. Thank you very much for attending. I'm Lillebø. First of all, I want to apologize for this change of hour, but I'm happy that you could find the time to join us. And I would like you to welcome to this joint science policy webinar. Just for those that are, this is an open webinar. So I would like just to make a brief introduction. Alternet is a network for those that are not, may not be that familiar with Alternet. It's a network that aims to develop long-lasting integration of European biodiversity and ecosystems research institutes, though contributing to European science policy interface on biodiversity and ecosystem services. And that's why this is within this webinars on science policy series. So in this case, this is a joint organization with CESAM. CESAM is the Center for Environmental and Marine Studies. It's an associated laboratory at the University of Aveiro, and it's a member of Alternet Association. And we are very pleased to have 3 researchers from CESAM joining this webinar. Just to frame, this webinar will be dedicated to challenges in marine conservation and sustainable use. We devoted this seminar to marine issues to complement the series that has been presenting by Alternet. Although CESAM, as the name indicates, it's environmental, so we cover fundamental and applied research, social science and applied science and natural science, and also, of course, advanced training. During this webinar, we will invite you to through a journey guided by Anilário, and I will make a brief introduction, by Catarina Eira and by Cristina Pita. So we will invite you to first, we will start in the deep sea, and here we have less knowledge of this environment, but human activities have been increasing. Then we invite you to come up to the open ocean. Here we find the big mammals that are both loved, admired, but also threatened, and not only due to human needs, but also human activities. And then we invite you to approach coastal waters. Here, comparatively, we have more knowledge, but we also face several challenges, and especially to meet this sustainable use of marine resources. So I hope that you enjoy with us this journey. We expect to have a presentation of about 15 minutes by each presenter. Then if you have a very urgent question, we can have 5 minutes for this very specific question. And then at the end of the 3 presentations, we then invite you to discuss the 3 topics together, or you may again ask specific questions to each of the speakers. So I would like to start or to continue by introducing the speakers, and I will start by Anilário. She is a deep sea ecologist with research. Her research is focused on biodiversity and biogeography of chemosynthetic ecosystems, reproductive ecology of invertebrates, and population connectivity. She has contributed to the policy process by authoring and reviewing the UN assessment of the state of the marine environment. And she has worked with the Portuguese Ministry of the Sea in the design of national networks and marine protected areas. Currently, she co-leads the Challenger 150 a 10-year program for deep sea biological science endorsed by the UN Decade of Ocean Science for Sustainable Development. So thank you, and Hilario, welcome. Then we have Catarina Eira. She has developed research on biological science with emphasis on biodiversity, conservation of marine biology. Catarina is the head of the Center for Research and Rehabilitation of Marine Animals, dedicated to supporting the rescue, rehabilitation, and release into the wild of marine animals of the ECOMAR Laboratory of Innovation and Sustainability of Marine Biological Resources. And Cristina Pita, she is a specialist in fisheries, with a strong focus on small-scale fisheries, sustainable seafood markets, marine resources management, marine governance, and coastal culture heritage. Cristina integrates the pool of national experts at United Nations World Ocean Assessment, covering the socioeconomic aspects of fisheries. So, very welcome to the three of you, to all the participants, and I now give the floor to Hilario.
Thank you, Anna. Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. I'll start by trying to share my screen. I say try because this is still always challenging somehow. Can everyone see my screen well? Yeah?
Yes, thank you.
Perfect. So as Anna already pointed out, we'll start with the deep sea, and I will. Now the things don't pass. I just tried this earlier and it worked. I'm sorry. There we go. And I will start by defining what deep sea is, and in its ecological sense, the deep sea is defined as the seabed and the water column below 200 meters depth, and that usually corresponds to the shelf break. And it is here that we commonly see a transition from typical shallow water fauna to the deep sea fauna. And with this definition, the deep sea occupies more than 65% of the Earth's surface. So we are actually looking at the largest living space on the planet. But despite this space and this vastness of the deep sea, less than 40 years ago, there was this cartoon published in the New Yorker, and this was the general feeling of the society in respect to the deep sea. People didn't care about the deep sea. They didn't even know why. They just didn't care. And you may think, okay, this was in the early 80s. It's a long time ago. But in fact, this was way after the starting of the beginning of the exploration of the deep sea. And we are now celebrating the 150th anniversary of the Challenge expedition that is often considering the beginning of deep sea exploration and science. And what I have here is a graph showing the different habitats that have been discovered, always below 200 meters depth, a long time, and some benchmarks on exploration. And as you see, this all started way before this cartoon was published here in '83, and this there are currently around 28, I think 28, 29 habitats described at depth. And you see these increments on discovery are usually associated with technological developments. And this happened mainly both in the end of the 19th century, when you see some really important expeditions like the Challenger that I've already mentioned, and then after the Second World War with the technology that wasn't developed for the best interests most of the times, but then it was applied to ocean exploration, and that contributed a lot in the second half of the 20th century for exploration of the deep sea. So we know now that the deep sea is not that desert-like environment, landscape that people didn't care about. There's more than just fine sediment. It's not plain. There are canyons, there are mountains, there are all sorts of different geological structures. But going back to technology has, as you know, very different aspects depending on when you look at it. So in the end of the 19th century, those ropes and weights that you see on the top left of this slide were state-of-the-art technology. Those were the best depth sounders at the time, and these were used by the Challenger expedition. And what was already pointed out at that time, and this is also why one of the reasons why the Challenger was so important, is that they could explore the global ocean with technology that was accurate, reliable, fast, and inexpensive. And these are actually words that are on the proposal that was presented to the Royal Society to fund the Challenger expedition. And I want you to remember these four aspects of technology that we will go back to it in the end of my presentation. Of course, today we see our state-of-the-art technology to explore the ocean in a completely different way. We have these massive platforms, research vessels, and underwater vehicles that I have here images of an expedition, actually 2 expeditions that occurred last year and in 2019 to explore the seafloor at 4,000 meters below ice. So we're not using cables and weights anymore, but it's this development of technology that has allowed us to advance in knowledge and about the deep ocean floor. But let's leave technology for a moment. And as I said before, these 150 years of exploration revealed an immense heterogeneity of habitats. Deep sea is not flat, it's not a desert-like uniform landscape, and this heterogeneity, like in any other natural system, promotes biodiversity. And I apologize straight away, I will incur in a common mistake, and I will show you only some pretty images of megafauna. But bear in mind that this is a very, very, very small part of deep sea biodiversity, but they are pretty, and that's why I show them here. They're not more important or less important of any components, but they're just for the sake of prettiness of this presentation shown here. And this include sponges with the rarest forms here on the left, sea cucumbers and snails at the abyssal plains. They can also include all sorts of corals and associated fauna. These are deep water corals that can form reefs, pretty much like our tropical coral reefs. And these corals can exist, for example, in seamounts and submarine canyons. And as you see in this image, they can host very diverse communities of crustaceans, bivalves, and echinoderms, and so forth. And for me, the most fantastic ones are the fauna that are associated with chemosynthetic-based ecosystems, such as hydrothermal vents and cold seeps. On the top left, you can see tube worms of the genus Regia, that are found in hydrothermal vents in Northeast Pacific. On the left, you can see an image of a chimney, or a complex of chimneys on hydrothermal vents in Antarctica. These were only discovered in 2009. And you can see very different fauna than you see on the top left. You see these communities are dominated by these white crabs and large barnacles. And on the bottom left, we have an example of an animal that was found on cold seeps. The yellow structures that you see is actually a gas hydrate. It's methane in solid state. And this is inhabited by this wonderful polychaete that's capable of cope with this very toxic environment. And when we talk of biodiversity, of course, we have to talk of resources. So The deep sea is a source of resources, and these include fish and shellfish. We are fishing deeper and deeper. Minerals that are targets for mining. On the left, you can see polymetallic nodules. This is I usually have one here to show. I do something this side that are targeted for mining. They're rich in all sorts of minerals, but also massive sulfides associated to hydrothermal vents. There's also oil and gas that is being extracted from deeper and deeper waters. What you see there on the hand of my colleague is one of those gas hydrates where worms can live. And of course, biodiversity also means, or most of all means, genetic resources. And this can be utilized for a range of different applications, including pharmaceuticals, cosmetics, food, industrial processes, and scientific research and inspiration. On the left side, on the bottom left side, you have a picture of a iron snail, as it is called commonly. This is Chrysomaon squamifero, and these scales are of a special league of iron that has been the source of inspiration for stronger materials for airplane hulls, cars, and even military equipment. And there's also other kind of inspiration, which I also consider a resource. And for example, the adult xenomorph of the alien movie sagas is inspired on the pelagic deep sea Phronima amphipode. So you see, the deep sea is full of resources, and we are, as society, starting to explore them further and further. And with exploitation, I took this definition from the Oxford Dictionary. Exploitation means the act of making use and benefiting from these resources. And some of these resources are being explored already. Others are on the verge of being explored, like the minerals. So like seabed mining is actually not happening yet. And the only way, and of course, this will cause impacts in the deep sea. And these impacts will interact with each other, and there will be a cumulative impact that we need to monitor, assess, and the only way we can inform policies to manage, conserve, and monitor these ecosystems is through the best possible science. And this is where we scientists, biologists come in. And I will very briefly show you some contributions of CESAM from my own group to deep sea science. And I said my own group here because I'm focusing on biology research and not on geology. That's also a strong component on CESAM. And we've been throughout the years discovering new habitats. You have here on the left the first images of hydrothermal vents under ice at 4,000 meters in the Arctic Ocean. We just captured these images and sampled it last year. A year ago, actually, I was coming back from this cruise. On the top right, you have a new species described this from this habitat. So we've been also contributing to the distribution of new species, the description of new species, sorry. We have been studying distribution and biogeography of different species. What I have here is hydrothermal vents, but other fauna, other communities we have also been studying. And we've also contributed to knowledge on ecology and evolution, particularly life cycles and reproductive ecology of invertebrates. And this is seen by most people as blue sky research. Does this apply? Is this applicable? Can this inform policies? When we talk about new habitats, of course, if we discover a new habitat, we may as well be discovering new resources. When we discover the new species, we are discovering new genes, new molecules, new enzymes, new pharmaceuticals, for example. And when we study life cycles and the reproduction of animals, we are we can inform policies on sustainable fishing and responsible mining. And when we study distribution of fauna and biogeography aspects, we are contributed, or we can contribute to the design and implementation of marine protected areas. And this has been the focus of CESAM in this area on deep sea biology, to inform all these policies at European, but also at global level. And I'm no idea how I am with time, Anna. Can you, sorry, I said I would control this myself, but of course I didn't.
Yes, you have 2 minutes.
2 minutes, okay, all right, easy. And to finalize, I've identified 2 grand challenges on informing policies to manage and conserve the resources of deep sea. And the first one is the size and the depth. As I told you this, we're talking about 65% of the earth of the surface of the earth, and more than 95% of the volume because of the water column. This is a huge area. And of course, there are still many unknowns, despite really large advances in the last 150 years. But because of this size and depth, we also need to use state-of-the-art technology to explore and monitor these environments. And this often is done through collaboration. There's no way these days that you can go and do a deep sea expedition campaign outside on your own. These are extremely collaborative and multidisciplinary programs. The second challenge that I've identified is that we're talking about extremely complex legal boundaries. Most of the deep sea is beyond national jurisdiction. I have a map here where in light blue you see the exclusive economic zones. So we're talking about 148 countries. So this is within national jurisdiction. And then on red, you have the claims for the extended continental shelf. Some nations have applied to have their continental shelf extended beyond what's designated under the UN Convention for the Law of the Sea of the 200 nautical miles. And then you have international waters and seabeds. The international seabed is called the area, and is here in orange. And the water column over this light orange, plus the water column of these red areas, is also international jurisdiction, so beyond national jurisdiction. And this is governed by a really complex set of organizations that is stopped by the UN Convention on the Law of the Sea, the UNCLOS. And what I have here is a scheme. I think I really like this scheme. I don't need to say anything about it. It just shows how complex it is and how easy it must be to conservation to fall between gaps here. On the left-hand side, you have conservation and science-oriented agreements. On the right side, you have extracted and use-oriented agreements. And some of these are binding and some of these are not binding. So there's here a very high level of complexity on governance. And trying to solve these and fill some gaps that have been identified, there's a new agreement that is being discussed under the UN, which will be international, it will be binding, and its objective is to conserve and use sustainably the marine biological diversity on areas beyond national jurisdiction. And this new agreement is based on 4 packages. One that deals with marine genetic resources, including questions on benefit sharing. Another package on environmental impact assessment. A third one on area-based management tools. And the 4th one on capacity building and marine technology transfer. And this leads me to my third, and for me, the biggest challenge of all, which is the equal access to deep sea resources. And I here want you to come back to my first aspects of technology that the challenger expedition already pointed out as essential to explore the global ocean, which is accurate, reliable, fast, and inexpensive. And today, most of the countries do not have access to the deep sea resources because they don't have access to this technology because it's expensive. Scientists are not trained to work on deep sea questions. But fortunately, this has been seen, it's been discussed under this agreement, and is being tackled by several programs, including the Challenge 150, that is a strong focus on capacity building. And I finish with that. Just you have my email if you want, website for Challenger and the lab here in University of Aveiro. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Anna. We have time for one quick question. The others will remain to the final discussion. So if you have a question that you would like to address to Anna. We can then move to the next one, because then we will all be, oh, there's some echo here. We will all be at the final discussion. So please, I give the floor to Catarina.
Okay, Anna, thank you. I think you are already seeing my presentation. Can you see it? Please let me know.
Yes. Thank you.
Okay. So first of all, I would like to say hello to everyone and thank you for organizing this seminar. So I will be focusing on a more or less particular challenge that we've been dealing with over the past few years, particularly in the Portuguese coast. So I'll be focusing on the definition of MPAs for cetaceans, and particularly on the problem related to the arbor porpoise population. So just to begin with, and to make a context of all the situation, all member states from the European Commission, from the European Union, have to or should comply with the European directives. And in this case, it's particularly important to mention the Habitats Directive and the Birds Directive. So, in order to comply with these directives, Portugal should define Natura 2000 sites for species listed in the Annex 2 of the Habitats Directive and Annex 1 of the Birds Directive. And to make this possible, a few years ago, we at the University of Aveiro and CESAM started a project to get data to base these new areas on. So one of the most important things to have or to know in order to be able to define protection areas for cetaceans according to the Habitats Directive is to know how many individuals there are in within national boundaries, actually. So that information was not available, and we started a live project to assess the abundance of marine mammal populations. So we focused particularly in the arbor porpoise and the bottlenose dolphins, and we had to define several types of census, but the most important types of census we did were made with airplanes. So this way we could cover the whole coast in a small number of days, and we managed to count all the animals that were sighted. These airplane censuses were repeated annually during 5 years, and finally we did get a good idea of the abundance and distribution of marine mammals in the Portuguese coast. But in fact, this data was, of course, very good and allowed us to make the first proposal for these areas, these protection areas that should be presented. And we found out that the areas that we were defining were considered very large for the Portuguese coast. So we were asked by the governing bodies to decrease the size of the areas and to focus particularly on the arbor porpoise because of the conservation problematic that was very or a lot more severe for this species than the other species we were dealing with. So we did that. We focused on the arbor porpoise, and we proposed 4 areas to be defined as Natura 2000 sites. And in the end, 2 of the areas were accepted. They were evaluated, they were considered in many meetings, then there was a public consultation, and 2 of the areas were accepted and 2 were not accepted at all, or they were not rejected as well, but they were not considered. So this was above all, this was a very good result for the conservation of the arbor porpoise, and it's a result of the combination of the science, of the scientific data we produced with the policy sides of this aspect, because these areas have to be legal. So they were actually accepted and turned it into law in 2019. And I also have to say that apart from the areas, we also did conservation plans, and they were also accepted legally in the same year, 2019. I will get back to this later on, but for now I would just like to explain why the arbor porpoise situation is so much more important than the other marine mammals, particularly in Portugal and also in Spain. This species is considered at the global stage, it's considered as least concerned species, but there are small populations that are already in a very critical state. We have the Black Sea population, which is already considered as endangered, and the Baltic Sea population considered as critically endangered. And there are other arbor porpoises in populations in the world that are also getting in a very concerning state. But the one thing in common is the main threat, the main activity that is causing a very high mortality for these species, and this is fisheries bycatch. There are other activities. There are also they are less important in terms of mortality, and some of them are only now getting more important. But at the moment, currently, fisheries bycatch is the one causing the most damage, to say it in this way. So, getting back to the populations in Europe, so we have the larger European population getting split into several small populations. We have already the one in the Black Sea, which is already defined as a new subspecies, so there is no relation with the other populations. And this Phocoena relicta in the Black Sea is evaluated at 90,000 individuals, the population, a recent estimate. The problem is that in the Iberian Atlantic, the one which I'm talking about, this population is estimated at less than 3,000 individuals. So the population is very, very small. And genetic studies have shown us that there is no genetic connection with the other populations, except for a probable hybridization zone in the Bay of Biscay. So the Portuguese and the Spanish population is considered a source population, but no information from the other areas is getting across to the Iberian population. So this is very concerning because we are predicting that in the next 20 years this population is disappearing if no particular measures are applied in the near future. So, because of this situation, Spain has already a legal document considering this population as critically endangered. So there's a law that already defines this population as critically endangered. And in Portugal, we are only now managing to upgrade the status of this population. And just this year, the new mammal red data book will state this. We will, or our team contributed to making this population from it was considered vulnerable before, and now it will be considered critically endangered because of the probable or the very probable extinction rate of this population. And just as an idea, this is an example of a kind of interaction with fisheries. And please notice that I'm showing this video of a beach scene interaction just because it's easier to find it on YouTube or whatever. But this is not the fishery causing the highest mortality. So this is just an example of captures and how sometimes just one fishing event can capture more than one individuals. So in this case, 4 individuals were captured in just one fishing event. So this was an important event. And most of these animals, even though fishermen, they make their highest efforts to get these animals back to the sea while they're still alive, many times these animals just turn up dead the next day because they have been already in the below water for so much time. So, fisheries bycatch is in fact at the moment the most concerning problem in Portugal. But as I was saying, this fishery type that I was showing you in the video is not the most concerning. The most concerning is the one used in the polyvalent fleet, which uses gill and trammel nets in a very large amount in the Portuguese coast. So during the same project that I was telling you about, we were also able to assess the number or the percentage of mortality that several types of fisheries were producing. So we found that considering all the main fishing fleets in Portugal, using an estimate from onboard observers, so people that were going on board with fishermen, considering logbooks filled in by boat captains and also electronic monitoring, we evaluated a percentage of nearly 7% of the population as being removed by fisheries bycatch. And most of this population, most of this mortality was being caused by gill and trammel nets. So science is already informed where the major problem is for this nearly extinct population. So the main fishing fleet causing mortality has been identified. It's the polyvalent fleet using gill and trammel nets. And this is an important idea if in the future we want to apply mitigation measures to a specific fishing fleet. So, but during this project we were also able to evaluate the conservation status of the species, which was of course in a very bad state, not in a good conservation status. And we evaluated the level of interaction with fisheries, of course. And finally, we, as I was saying before, we did manage to build the management plans, and the management plan was approved in 2019. Please notice that between the proposal of the project and the legally defining documents, there was a 10-year period. So this is a very, it lasts a long time. It takes a long time to get these things politically approved. And even so, even though the management plan was approved, no measure is being applied since then. So the arbor porpoise population is in the same situation as before. Even though we have information about the fishing fleet that is more concerning, we have information about within the fishing fleet which kind of boats are more concerning. So the small boats are so much more representative within the fleet, and they are causing they represent a very large amount of effort of fishing. So this is the segment causing the highest mortality. And we also know the areas where these interactions are more important. So this is a map of the most recent census we've performed. So this year in summer, we managed to have a large-scale airplane census again, and we confirmed that the arbor porpoise is concentrated in this area we had already defined. So we know exactly where and in which activities conservation measures are particularly needed. And this, of course, leads to the questions that I wrote here. So during this year's Ocean Decade meeting in Lisbon, there was a lot of talks about the sustainable fisheries and how that can be achieved. And there is the question of is this problem ever being considered in sustainable fisheries? I mean, can we have sustainable fisheries when we know that mortality for marine mammals is so high? Well, actually, when this conservation problem is addressed, one thing that for sure has to be considered is the very important aspect of both socially and economically of fisheries in Portugal. This country, our country, is very based on the importance of fisheries, and of course this activity has to be supported, specifically financially supported, if we do want to ever get conservation measures to work in this country. Sim? So
excuse me.
Just to add some more information. So the census we had this year, a few months ago, shows that the arbor porpoise is concentrated in the area that is already approved. But of course, the areas we did get to approve were just a few from several that we proposed. And within the areas that we proposed in the beginning, there was another area in the very northern part of the country that was connected to the Spanish border. And this area would be very much important to allow for a connection with the Spanish population. So in the future, we would really advise that a transnational area for conservation of these species and transnational policies would be applied, because of course these species, most of the species, they don't know where one country's border starts and the other one begins. So transnational cooperation would be very much appreciated in this area. And of course, and to finish up, this is a very serious problem, not only in Portugal, but also in Spain, in France, and the number of animals, bicod animals, is actually not decreasing. And this problem has already been emphasized at many levels, and it's well established that bycatch is leading to extinction of species and in some areas. And of course, a lot of this is happening because most of the directives from the European Union are not being fully applied by member states. And this application of the European directives would be a very good start, just by applying the legislation and the regulations that are already in place. So this would be already a very good thing. So to finish, I just want to say that a lot of science is out there that is not being used in policy, and this is definitely the way to go to foster this collaboration between science and policy. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Katerina. Is there any urgent questions for Katerina? It's fine. Then we move to thank you, Katerina, because I'm sure there are transversal questions that will be addressed at the end. Christina Peter, then the floor is yours, please.
Okay, so you can hear me. I'm going to try and control my own time, and I'm going to start sharing the screen. Please let me know if you can see my screen, like now.
Yes, perfect.
Yeah, perfect.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Sorry. So I'm going to be talking about a bit closer to shore, and I'm going to be talking about transforming small-scale seafood systems in Europe. Why is it important to look at this now? What is being done in this field? It will be very for several of you in the seminar. You will know that seafood supply chains are global, and the COVID-19 pandemic was a bit of a eye-opener for a lot of people how global seafood supply chains are. Fish and fish trade products are amongst the most highly traded commodities around the globe. This image here on the top is a typical image of seafood supply chains. You can see that the trade on fish and fish products is quite complex. It's dynamic, it's highly segmented, and it's highly diversified as well. And this is a bit of a reflection of a better informed consumer that changed his needs and is demanding different seafood, and the seafood comes from all over the world, but also of markets offering more diversity in there to the consumer as well, because of consumer demand. Another important point to have into consideration here is that despite the fact the most traded seafood around the globe is small pelagics, that are quite affordable, small pelagics in very high quantities, there is an important share of trade that consists of high value species, such as bream, sea bass, tuna, and lots of these species, even shrimp, lots of these species come from small-scale fisheries. So why should we be looking at small-scale fisheries? Why is this important? What is its contribution to aquatic food systems? Small-scale fisheries are responsible for around 40% of the global fisheries catch. So that's a lot. It directly contributes to food security, especially at the local level and especially in the developing world. It provides local markets with fresh fish that contributes to nutrition. It's quite important. In general, the intake of seafood contributes to 20% of nutrition of the intake of people of animal protein, and in some parts of the developing world, this goes up to 50%. So it becomes quite, it's very obvious to see the importance of small-scale fisheries in aquatic food systems. Despite the fact that it's quite important at the local level, and especially in the global south, we need to consider the important share of small-scale fisheries that enters global trade. And the FAO has estimated that 26% of all the marine catch from small-scale fisheries enters global trade. That's quite a large proportion. And these are, in general, high-value species. Small-scale fisheries is also very important in terms of livelihoods. Just 60 million people, as you can see here on this part, 60 million people are employed in small-scale fisheries, either full or part-time. This represents 90% of everybody that works in fisheries. If we account for subsistence fisheries and additional household members working in fisheries, either upstream or downstream, then we're talking about 492 million people, depending at least partially in small-scale fisheries. This is 6.3% of the world population. It's a very, very large number of people depending on a particular sector. Also very important, and especially in Europe, because we talk a lot about gender in Europe, is the fact that small-scale fisheries employs a lot of women. 4 out of every 10 people employed in small-scale fisheries are women. So that's 45 million women work on small-scale fisheries. They mostly work in post-harvest, in trading, but they are involved in all the small-scale fisheries, from pre-harvest to post-harvest and commercial harvests. All the parts of small-scale fisheries involve women. What about Europe? If we look at small-scale fisheries in Europe, how do we do compared to the rest of the world? Small-scale fisheries are of extreme social economic importance. 80% of the EU fleet is small-scale, and 54% of all the people employed in fisheries are employed in small-scale fisheries. But small-scale fisheries are not just these values and statistics. They are also, in Europe, they're very important contributors of employment, especially in rural areas where there is not a lot of other jobs available. And this includes also a lot of women employed in small-scale fisheries. They're very important in terms of food security and sovereignty, an issue that Europe is paying a lot of attention to lately. It's important in terms of cultural heritage and tradition, and it provides the markets with a diversity of local, seasonal, high-quality, fresh products that tend to be highly appreciated. I'm also saying this is right now we're in the right time to pay attention to small-scale fisheries in Europe. There's quite a good momentum for this. There are calls for addressing current challenges. The World Trade Organization just reached an agreement in fisheries subsidies that will help to fight illegal, unreported and unregulated fisheries. The issue of food systems and food security is being heavily discussed in scenarios of climate change, especially in the COPs. It was the case in COP26 and will be the case in COP27. The UN SDG 14, and since Katerina mentioned the Ocean Conference, which was focused on UN SDG 14, life underwater, 14B calls for small-scale fisheries access to resources and markets, and that is a bit lagging. The European Union has financing that can finance a lot of these of local initiatives. They're called Fisheries Local Action Groups. They finance local initiatives in coastal areas. So there's also the financing to improve some of these things. The new EU Farm to Fork strategy is very much focused on reducing carbon footprint and promoting sustainable local products. So, and a bit also improving traceability. And this is a good timing for small-scale fisheries as well. The EU is very concerned about food security lately. It started a bit with the COVID-19 pandemic, but also with the crisis on energy and transportation, and very recently with the war in Ukraine that is bringing home the problems of food security and the need that we have to target this a bit. For the first time ever in 2021, there was a UN Food Systems Summit that is going to continue into the future, but it's the first time that UN is focusing and has a summit just focused on food systems. And of course, aquatic foods was there, probably not as much as I would like, but it was there. 2022 is also the UN year, it's the International Year of Artisanal Fisheries and Aquaculture. That's what IAFA means. And that brings, it's calling attention to artisanal fisheries and aquaculture and increasing the visibility of the sector. So that's a lot of activities were generated around small-scale fisheries, and that's important. And the FAO has just published very recently, a couple of months ago, a UN Blue Transformation, which is a strategy for improving seafood systems. So all in all, there's a good momentum to focus on small-scale fisheries in terms of food systems. I've been involved in a few initiatives with some colleagues from all over Europe. We've produced a book about small-scale fisheries in Europe that was published in 2020. I don't want to lie, sorry, 2020. And we were trying to see it, and it has 28 chapters. So we're trying to see all over Europe some of these challenges that small-scale fisheries faces, and the one that came as very important was market challenges, and specifically the lack of profitability of small-scale fisheries. That they target these high-quality products that tend not to be recognized by the markets, and individualizing markets. They suffer huge competition for market access with competing with industrial fisheries and imported products, with aquaculture products. Aquaculture tends to focus on sea bream, sea bass, which the small-scale fisheries sector also focus on, and also recreational fisheries in several locations, especially in the south of Europe, which also targets these kind of species that the small-scale fishing industry targets and tends to sell illegal to restaurants, especially in touristic areas. There's also kind of a limited capacity by the small-scale fisheries sector to get a good price. And that is very much related to the fact that the market strategies give most of the power to the middleman and the enterprise that are in the middle of the value chain. There's also kind of a lack of organization, capacity, and competence of small-scale fishing organizations to improve their marketing skills, rightfully so. The regulation, the existing regulation also is not very conducive with in getting a better price. And the fact that we have a global market and free trade also means that we can put a lot of products from from other locations all over the world that can get to the European market much cheaper than small-scale fisheries production from Europe. There's also in another project after this book, we started this other project called LabMath that was very focused on the Mediterranean, and we're targeting some initiatives to see what were the weaknesses of some initiatives in order to improve these marketing opportunities for small-scale fisheries. And we saw that some of the weaknesses don't come just from the small-scale fishing industry. From that side, there's also market weaknesses that come from the opposite side of the value chain. The market is dominated by a few well-established species like tuna and sea bream and sea bass and salmon. And it's difficult sometimes to put other species into the market. There's a lot of problems with traceability as well, and there is a lack of tools and strategies to meet the consumer demand for sustainable, ethical, and social responsible seafood. Because I'm interested in seafood systems, like I'm always saying, seafood systems is from the water to the plate. So I cover all these from the fishermen, the part of production until the part of consumption. In this other project called Chefs and Chefs, we were working with consumers to try and understand what the consumers want, and we surveyed 3,500 people from 500 from each of these countries identified in the map. And we wanted to see, this is only one of the results of the project. So we want to see what kind of relevant information affects seafood purchase decision. And it's interesting to see these ones that are going to start appearing in red. The origin of seafood is very important for consumers, the environmental sustainability and social responsibility. All of these three are something that small-scale fisheries products and small-scale fisheries can focus upon and provide products that target these. You can have labels of origin, you can have sustainable production, have labels focused on sustainability, and also you can focus much more on social responsibility, probably that coming from larger scale fisheries. So these are very important results that could put small-scale fisheries a bit at an advantage. But then what do retailers want? What do retailers provide to us? We as consumers, all of us as consumers, we have quite limited choice. Before we choose the big supermarkets chains, the retailers where we go and buy have already chosen before us. So we wanted to understand as well. So, and these big retailer chains, they are the new fishmonger. They dominate seafood markets in Europe and in most of the developed world. And they have this tendency to rely on third-party certification schemes, such as maybe the most well-known is the MSC, the Marine Stewardship Council, and that secures the environmental sustainable seafood, because that's an easy way to relying on this kind of certified products, meets the criteria that you want, and you don't focus maybe on something else. So the retailers choose before we can choose. So, but most retailers all over Europe say that they support the SDGs. So we were very interested in trying to understand, okay, SDG 14B does call for small-scale fishers access to resources and markets, as we saw before. So what are retailers procuring? Are they buying from small-scale fisheries? What are the challenges to procure from small-scale fisheries? Are they interested in small-scale fisheries even? And we did interviews, we talked to 17 retailers from across Europe to try and see what's happening in terms of retail. And what we found is that 94% of retailers do identify that they have challenges sourcing from small-scale fisheries. And the challenges are a bit, most of them a bit to be expected. So they are unable to procure seafood due to the low number of certified small-scale fisheries. There's a lack of agency, a lack of connection between the retailer and the producer, and they feel it's difficult to connect to the producer. There's a lack of consistency and quantity coming from small-scale fisheries, and that's quite important. Also, there's problems of logistics and infrastructure, like the cold chains, especially if the product comes from the developing world. And there's a lack of poor data available on small-scale fisheries, and this kind of links to the next one on seafood certification. There's low numbers of seafood certification, not just because certification is expensive, but because also certification is data demanding, and there's little data on small-scale fisheries sometimes to be able to go for certification. However, we also noticed that the retailers are interested in supporting. They would buy small-scale fishes if the small-scale fishes were certified. And another project, and these are several projects, and we've been looking at this for several years already, from a cost action to a network of small-scale fishes that's been in place for 6 years. We've been kind of collecting information, me and some other colleagues, about alternative market strategies for small-scale fishes, and we've collected information from 370 initiatives from all over the world. If I focus a bit here in Europe, just to give a bit of a snapshot, it's very focused on shortening the supply chain and also certification schemes. So focusing in Europe, to finish very quickly, there are several types of this kind of innovation ways to market and sell small-scale fisheries products. And most of them focus on this small shortening the value chain, so connecting the producer to the consumer, like the cabage de pêche here, which is a kind of a fish box scheme. There's a bunch of other initiatives that change the distribution channel, selling through online apps, and Abelobi, which is a very well-known of these apps from South Africa, now is being used in several European countries like Greece and Ireland. We are diversifying a lot of the products using these kind of fish box schemes. There are a bunch of labeling schemes. Spain has a lot of interesting labeling schemes, for instance, and they include the environmental labeling schemes focused on environmental issues in origin and production methods. And there's also a bunch of awareness raising campaigns and promotion events that are also interesting and focus on keep the focus on small scale fisheries. And the last slide, a bit continuing for what Annie Hilario did, that I just introduced last minute, the perks of being the last one to present. Some of the grand challenges that maybe we can see connected to small scale fisheries and this kind of market is that there is a need to improve small scale fisheries management and governance. And there's also definitely the need to support sustainable local schemes that probably don't get the support that they need, both also financial support. I need also to invest in seafood quality assurance frameworks, focus on small-scale fisheries, and by that we mean like certification schemes focus on these kind of fisheries. Improving traceability and consumer trust, and the EU is very focused on now on this new EU grants in traceability schemes. Improving access of small-scale fishes to markets is a big problem and a difficult one, and some of it will pass maybe by improving the visibility of small-scale fisheries. One of the things that we are proposing as advice on that report of retailers is that they need to improve the public disclosure around small-scale fisheries, sustainable seafood in their supermarket shelves, because they do source from small-scale fisheries. They just don't identify in the shelf what comes from what. And thank you for your attention. I think I went a bit over time. And if you want any further information on any of these projects that I've been working on that are focused always in the same subject, please just drop me a line. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Christina. I now open the floor, first giving the floor also for a 5 minutes question to Christina directly to be even with the other two speakers. Any quick question? Well, if not, then I open the floor for the entire audience to address the question to one of the speakers or to or a topic for the three speakers to address. You can also drop your question in the chat if you would like. It's always hard to get the first question, so I can start if no one else is starting. I can start. We started this journey from the deep sea to the coastline, and we also acknowledge that we have less information and perhaps more information because of the challenges and the occupation of the coastline. And so I want to do my questions to the three speakers, but going on the other way, meaning that we could hear that the population is very much depending on the fishery sector, that there is a time lag between the knowledge that we get from science until it can be applied to the policies. And we also heard about the need. So the deep sea is the new frontier, and what can we learn? What can we learn from what we have experienced in the coastline? What can we learn from what we have experienced in the open ocean? And what can we apply to the deep sea regarding science and policy? Who would like to start?
Right. I can start if you want.
Thank you. Thank you, Anna.
So I think we're in a privileged situation in terms of learning from other lessons. So people that work on the deep sea, because of course some impacts are already being felt. Climate change is an action. Until very recently, people wouldn't think that the deep sea would be affected, but there's now evidence. So there's not much we can do. There's not much we can learn with the other ones, but there are activities that are only now being thought and implemented in the deep sea, like seafloor mining. And there is an effort to actually develop policies before mining starts. There's been an effort being done internationally through the International Seabed Authority that the regulations, the mining code is being developed before mining starts. So as long as we are able to communicate our data and science to the policymakers, and this already answers a question in the chat, I think we are in a good position in the deep sea to learn. So not running after the damage, but actually being in the forefront of the damage and actually implement policies for sustainable and responsible uses of resources.
Thank you very much, Anna. Katerina and Christina, would you like to add to the same question before we go to the question in the chat?
Add something. I feel like I don't have much to add because I do work with small-scale fishermen, not exactly the public that targets the deep sea. But an interesting one that I think Anna mentioned in a presentation that I thought that's quite similar to small-scale fisheries in many ways, is this issues of equity and equality of access, because this is a gigantic problem in coastal areas with small-scale fisheries. The problems of access to resources and markets, they struggle to access. There's a fierce competition with the larger scale sector, and there are lots of problems of access to resources, even not just markets. And that's probably something that would be interesting to see in the future, in terms of how do you access the deep sea? Who accesses the deep sea? Not talking about fisheries, I'm talking which countries access, because it's going to be almost taking this fisheries case scenario to a bigger scale, and you'll see the same problems. In terms of fisheries, I won't say I would be very positive about it. Fisheries tends to be a very reactive kind of, fisheries management tends to be very reactive. First we exploit, probably overexploit, and then when things are overexploited, then we start putting management measures in place that potentially are quite limiting. So it tends to be a bit of a reactive situation, much more than proactive. So I'm not sure if I have a very positive message there, but interesting issues to look into.
Thank you. Katerina, would you like to add?
I think that definitely the way is open to discussion, and more collaboration is needed from both sides, maybe. And in fact, I think that the main driver for all activities, both economic or science-based or conservation-based, they are all led by the economic importance of one matter or the other, whether it is on coastal areas or in the deep sea. So it's important that we can give the appropriate value to the resources that are being dealt with. And many times for natural resources, that value is not taken into consideration. So I would really like to see the ecosystem services being evaluated and being considered in all the policy decisions in the future.
Thank you very much. If you can unmute yourself. Yes, perfect. Thank you. I have now understood that there's a conflict with my headsets when with other micros. I'm sorry for that. Before I give the floor to Elena, I will go back to the question that has been written in the chat by Alessia and Anna. So, who communicates the data science to policymakers? How does the process take place? And are there researchers involved? So I think this is the same question to the three of you.
I honestly don't know. I think it will depend on every case. The deep sea community, biology community mainly, because it's a very small community, and has been joining efforts for 10 years now on several programs, and that have that are now focused on a project called DOSE, Deep Ocean Stewardship Initiative, that actually makes the interface between science and policymakers. DOSE, I don't know the legal status of DOSE right now. But DOSE sits as an observer in the International Seabed Authority, in the BBNJ agreement, and on other several international fora. And those years, I think around 700 members right now from all sides of biological sciences, but also from social and legal sciences. So on the deep sea, we managed to form this strong community that kind of expresses our voice to policymakers. And I put the link. I put the link to the DOSI website on the chat.
I would ask those that are not speaking to unmute themselves, please.
To mute.
Unmute. To mute. Sorry, to mute themselves. Thank you. Yes, Christina, please.
I can add something on the fisheries side. On the fisheries side, maybe the most well-known way to communicate science and data to policymakers, for instance, to the EU in this case, is ICES, the International Council for the Exploration of the Seas. Has been running for 100 years, more than 100 years, and it provides advice on fisheries and basically brings data from science from all over the countries and provides scientific advice. This is important to management. But you also have at European level. You have the ACs, the advisory councils. There's a few for different fisheries, for long distance fleets, for different fisheries all over Europe. Those are advisory councils go a bit beyond just scientists and brings a lot of different stakeholders together that also provides, again, as the name suggests, advice to Brussels in this case. And that actually, the ICES doesn't have fishermen. It has scientists, but the advisory councils brings together both scientists, fishermen. Actually, I think they have to have, from the top of my head, I could be wrong, and don't quote me on this, 40% of the people in the advisory councils need to be fishermen, but it also has NGOs and management bodies. So those are probably the two most significant advisors of the European Commission in fisheries matters.
And Katarina, would you like to add?
Yes, there are several organizations in the case of marine mammals and in the case of marine megafauna, like, for example, the Ashkobans, the Akobams for the Mediterranean, in global terms, the International Whaling Committee. And all these organizations have national representatives, which are usually researchers in going to their meetings. So this is an important way of getting the information to the policymakers, because we are going to those meetings and we present our data, and then they will have a more overcoming importance. They are the ones that can contribute more directly to influencing, let's say it like this, the policy worldwide or at European Union level, just as an example.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for your answers. I give the floor to Helena Vieira.
Hi everyone, thanks for the nice webinar. It was nice to see these three different overviews of different areas. It's not a question, it's more of a contribution to this particular topic, because I think most of you focused on there is science out there and scientists are doing and publishing a lot of interesting or alarming results. And this doesn't seem to, I think it was Katarina who mentioned that it takes a long time to actually put this data back into policy making. And we could speak a whole afternoon about why is that happening. Anna Hilario mentioned that, for example, in the mining part, there is this aggregation of people in the DOSI project, and it actually started to be a concern of policymakers even before action is really happening in this field. And Cristina is actually a very good example of the worst scenario where things are really bad before they even get to the policy-making table. I think one of the organizations nobody mentioned, and I think it's worth every scientist in this webinar to know, is the European Marine Board. Because it's at the European level, it's actually a policy think tank that has several groups, and it focuses on, of course, the topics where it focuses also changed. In a long time ago, it had a deep sea, for example, focus group where I was, and Ricardo Santos was as well, and things, for example. But it is quite an important board that directly affects marine policy making at EU level. And then also, I think it's important to acknowledge that most of the times things come from a top-down approach, especially when it comes to Iberia. We usually follow the European directives and guidelines and not the other way around. So sometimes it's more positive to actually exert pressure or influence within the European organizations if we want to see something here. So the one thing that nobody mentioned, and I think it's quite relevant, is that each one of us can actually be part of this policy influencing decision making by being closer to the policy making organizations, either as members of these organizations that you all mentioned, or also by actually being closer to the cabinets of the ministers that are relevant to our matters. Because asking for a meeting with a minister is not that hard, and they actually say yes more times than we think they do. So this just to say that I think science needs to come closer to policy, but also needs to understand that policy is in waves of momentums. And therefore, Katerina, I think the marine protected areas momentums come and go, and the fisheries for Cristina, the same thing. So this is what I would like to say. And the question I have actually is just to ask to these three. I think Cristina is an easy answer, but Anna and Katerina, did you ever participate, or do you actually incentivize the writing of policy briefs from the outputs of your science papers? And
Yes.
if so, can you share a bit of that experience with others?
Yes, so I do that mainly through DOSI. I think
Katerina turned down.
Okay, so we do that. We do produce quite a bit of policy briefs through DOSI, and DOSI is an open network. So if you, as a deep sea scientist, have something you think should be published into a policy brief, you contact them and you publish. They have a communicator office that helps you producing the policy brief. And there's a brand new one, I think, came out last week on why we still don't have enough scientific knowledge to start deep sea mining. I can share that with you, but that's one of the big activities of those is actually to produce policy briefs and digest science to policymakers and the rest of society. Yeah.
Yes, and I think that's actually one of the main goals of all the work we do. I mean, all our conservation or all our scientific studies actually don't have in mind getting new scientific data just for the science sake of it, but actually so that we can implement measures in the future. And we've contributed to the marine protected areas, to the management plans. We produce a lot of advice so that Portugal can respond at European level to the European Committee. So that's in fact the main goal of our work is to support Portugal in complying with European committee directives.
Can I add some? Despite the question have not been for me, I totally agree with what Elena said. Yeah, the public can put a lot of pressure, and politicians listen to you, especially when it's close to elections. And you can put a lot of pressure on politicians to listen to certain messages. Some groups can put more than others. Obviously, as an individual is more difficult, but as an organization, as an NGO, as civil society, it's easier. So some strength in numbers. I do put a lot of policy briefs out in most of my projects to inform policymakers, both at local level, at the EU level, and at the national level on several aspects of what we're doing. But we also been focusing a lot of informing at different levels. We've been producing policy briefs for the policymakers, but we have also been putting out a lot of these kind of toolboxes, these step-by-step guidelines for the industry. For instance, we had that Chefs and Chefs project that I showed several results. We actually gave them a toolkit, a step-by-step how to enter a fisheries improvement project, how to be more sustainable, to maybe enter an MSC certification scheme. So a kind of a step-by-step what you need to do one by one. And we've been also focusing a bit on this communication to the public as well. So having books and lots of cartoons and infographics, which is a thing that I particularly like a lot. And I think the public loves infographics. I love infographics. It's very hard to do, but you put in one page, sometimes in two sides of the same, you put pretty much an entire project summarized in one page. It's a bit sad that you summarize it in 3 years of your research in one page, but you can. It's hard to do. There are also issues here, Elena, that I think financing also doesn't always, because maybe I'm assuming most of the people in this room are scientists, academics. The problem is sometimes is also finance. When we apply for financing, you apply for financing to do the research. Lots of times you're very limited in the amount of financing you can get to do the rest of the stuff, these policy briefs, the communication with the public. I mean, these things cost a bit of money, and they are hard to do. To do an infographic, which is something I really like, and I thought, oh, let's do it as an infographic form because it should be easier. No, it isn't. Actually, it took months to do an infographic to summarize one project because it's difficult to pass a message that is clear, the public will understand without scientific jargon. And it's not easy to do these things, and they take time and they take money. And that's maybe some of the things we need to have more money to the communication of science to the public, and then considering that the public influences decision making.
Thank you very much, Christina. And Anna, I don't know if you want to add, because you have also been publishing regarding the deep sea.
Books, children's book.
Yes.
Yeah, so we also make an effort to talk to future policymakers, and one thing we like to do, which is actually good fun, lots of work but good fun, is to produce some children books and translate them on several languages. And also this is also a product of DOSI. And there's one book on marine litter and another book on mining, on potential mining, that we wrote for children. So we do try to talk to the general public as well and civil society, because I don't think that cartoon from 1983 is still valid. I think people do care about the ocean floor these days, but it's still difficult to make them understand that what we do on the surface actually impacts on the bottom. And I think only then people will truly care about it. Of course, science communication has made wonders for the deep sea. I mean, the Blue Planet makes everyone love the deep sea and other environments, but especially to the deep sea. I think public communication and science communication has made wonders, and the wow factor of the deep sea also helps us and plays on our grounds. So we also have that to work with, and we try to explore that a lot. The wow factor is a a good bonus for us.
Thank you. So you gave me the wild factor, and I will pass to Katerina with the love factor, because you have a lot of volunteers for your rescue center. So if you could, can you just unmute? Briefly?
I'm unmuted now.
Okay, because they were, okay, perfect. Just for me to finish the love factor, because you have a lot of volunteers, and if you use these volunteers as multipliers for literacy and for this communication.
Well, unfortunately, this is a story with many times with not very happy endings. So anyway, I think we use these young people more to raise their awareness, to make them more aware of the problematics that that surround the conservation of marine mammals and turtles and seabirds. Because many times on television and on all the media, the information that is available is very biased towards their likability, like you said. We have many students asking for traineeships in behavior, in studying behavior of these animals. And we see that they don't really know what are the main concerns surrounding these species. So we really hope, and we really try to change that and to raise their awareness concerning the possible negative effects of human activities on these species.
Thank you very much. I pass the floor to the audience for you to ask questions. Yes, Christina, I give you the floor. Then.
As a member of the audience that saw Katerina's and Anna's presentation, Katerina, I had a question for you. That when you were presenting, and you did bring you mentioned the fact that purse seiners being such a problem in bycatch of marine mammals, and the high impact that purse seiners can have on marine mammals. And to me, immediately kind of came to mind, connecting to my work. To my mind came the fact that MSC certification, that the sardine purse seine fishery was once MSC certified. I was wondering how much mortality of cetaceans was considered when you do an MSC certification to a purse seiner, if that was taken into consideration at all, the bycatch of cetaceans too. I don't know. That's fine.
Yes, so what I showed was beach seine, not purse seine. Okay, purse seine is the boats that mainly catch sardines and the pelagic fish. Okay, so this was beach seine. It's a very, I'm sure you know, it's a very traditional fishery that operates from the beaches. So it's not to be confused with with purse seines. In fact, purse seiners do have a degree of bycatch, but not as important as the other fisheries. So the ones that you are mentioning, purse seiners, they enclose the fish, and many times, even if it's an animal enclosed in the fish, surrounded, they can get out. And what I mean is that they don't get underwater. Even if they are surrounded, they are able to come to the surface and breathe. So this is not for us a very concerning type of fishery. Okay, and I think, I'm not sure, but I think they do have the certification. I'm not sure if they lost it They no longer have it. But when the certification was being evaluated, bycatch was indeed considered. Yes, that was an important factor. And in the end, all the data indicated that there were captures for common dolphin, not porpoises, which are the most concerning species in terms of conservation. Oh, but even though there was some bycatch for common dolphin, it was not as important as other fisheries, like I was saying, the one from trammel nets and gill nets. So and please, the one I was showing, it's beach seine, not Persine. But it's a very good thing what you to have more fisheries certified. It would be actually a good way to go, because it's one of the things that it has to be evaluated. How much bycatch do they cause?
Thank you very much. I give the floor again to the audience. I was checking the chat. There is a question about the book on marine litter for Anilario. Would you like to comment on that, Anna?
I don't have the link handy with me. The other one I do. I will. I was actually looking for it. It has been reprinted in English. It has been translated to many languages as well, and printed. I'm sure there's quite a few copies of Portuguese books still, and at least the English version is available online. I just don't have the link here with me right now, but I'll look for it and I'll post it in a chat.
Thank you very much. Now back to the audience. I see I can recognize one and another name. So I know that we have some younger researchers, and this is a very good opportunity for you to ask questions about these fields of research. If not, then I have a challenging question for the three speakers, because also by recognizing, I will not pinpoint people, but by recognizing one or two names in the audience and knowing that they are younger in their career, what would be, so this conference was about challenges, and you identified, some of you also had in your last slide some questions, so challenging questions for the future. Knowing that we cannot address everything at the same time, what would be the way to go, and what would you, would not say advise, but in this case also challenge young researchers to be involved, to support you in this way to go in forward. Not, of course, in the more short term, of course, in long term it's more difficult, but where would you start from, and how would you engage with the younger researchers, the audience, first of all by starting to have them asking questions, and then by having them involved in these fields of research?
I can start again. And my answer is a contradictory one. It's a twofold, and the twofolds contradict each other. The best way to attract young researchers to deep sea research is to tell them you can dive in a submersible, you go to sea, you see these wonderful places for the first time before anyone else, you become an ocean explorer, or that. Amazing, everyone wants to come. Beautiful. The problem is that this is highly costly. And what we should be really invested in is in low cost technology that everyone has access to, and that does not include submersibles and big expensive ROVs. And so it involves a lot more of sitting at your desk and use of course, for the developers, it's great for engineers to develop a glider that crosses the ocean and goes to 4,000 or 5,000 meters depth. But for the user of that technology, it's much more boring to stay in your computer analyzing the images and the data that these technologies bring to you. So I really think we have to invest in low cost, very effective and low cost technologies, but that is not as sexy as using the very high cost technology that allows us to go in person to the ocean floor. And that's what's been attracting people for the last 2-3 decades.
Thank you, Anna. Elena, is it related to this answer, or would you? Yes, then please, if you the others don't mind, if it's closely related, please, Elena.
Yeah, just a suggestion, Anna, just to think a wild box, out of the box idea, because everybody's paying now to go for a 20-minute flight to the moon. So maybe the answer is a combination of those cheap and expensive technologies where you take the rich ones down under, they take up a seat, but they pay for it and they pay for the rest of the research. So just a thought.
It's being done.
Really?
It's being done. There's a couple of very wealthy men. It is funny, it's always men on this being the explorers. There's a couple of very wealthy men that have built their own vessels and their own submersibles, and they've been with the aim of going to, there's one particular one that built the 5 deep expedition. So his aim was to go to the 5 deepest points on the 5 oceans. But fortunately, his public relations thought this wasn't such a good idea if you not involve scientists. So there was a full science program around this. And so there's these ocean explorers are at the same time becoming philanthropists and financing some science. But still, it's very localized science. And what we really need to tackle now on deep sea issues is the global seafloor, and make sure that we cover more than just our focus of interest. Like, I like hydrothermal vents. I know you like hydrothermal vents. So, but we need to expand and not focus just on these pinpoint ecosystems that have been the focus of science in the last 40 decades, and actually be able to explore the full expanse and assess the resources before we actually can use them.
Thank you. Christina, would you like to?
Maybe I can add, I'm afraid I probably will go on the same direction as Anna. Is not probably the most sexy thing that younger people, young researchers like. The social sciences, which I find fascinating, and I think everyone should be interested in social science, especially if you work with fisheries. I for many years, I would finish my last slide would always say, you don't manage fish, you manage fishermen. So you need to understand and you have to focus a lot on the social side, on the human side of the fishing activity. So I'm just focusing on fisheries here, not the blue economy in general. For instance, on my last slide, you could see one of the projects I have there, the C2C, is a new EU project. It's focusing on seafood systems. We're working with the octopus. We want to increase public understanding and the communication with the public about sustainable seafood. We want to improve traceability. The project is very much focused on blockchain and improving traceability on the seafood and seafood systems. So right now I'm developing a systematic review of the literature on traceability in small-scale fisheries. And if anyone is interested in taking part. It's a bit of a desk work again, not the most sexy, but taking part on looking at initiatives focus on this, on traceability on small scale fisheries. The aim is to publish a paper. We always look for people that want to collaborate and do a part either of their thesis or just collaborate and then have their name on the paper when it gets published. Hopefully it gets published. It sounds like I'm convinced it will, but at a later stage. So if anyone wants, please get in touch with me. But yes, it's a lot of desk work and probably, you know, you're not going to swim with the dolphins. I'm afraid. I'm sorry.
Thank you, Christina. Katerina?
Yes. Well, it's a bit the same. We do get a lot of people trying that seem to want to work with us, but sometimes we do have to tell them that they're not going to swim with dolphins, and they will not hug them, they will not pet them. Sometimes it's a very different idea from the reality of what we do. So, but I do really think that we need more researchers, and especially the really young people with new ideas and a good knowledge of what the world is today. Because sometimes I think that we are getting outdated concerning the reality today. But we do need new students. And I would advise them just to go beyond the obvious, go beyond the obvious information, and really look for the causes and the impacts of what it's being presented to them. So actually, when someone wants to work with us, I always say that they are going to have to do a lot of physical work, smell really bad, and be very dirty, because we work with very dirty things. So if anyone is willing to sustain all this, then it's someone that wants to work with marine mammals and with marine megafauna conservation. And usually we don't get that many people.
Thank you, Katerina. Questions from the audience? Well, is there any final comment that any of the three of you would like to give to the audience before I go to the closer session?
Maybe I'll say, don't be shy. If you have any kind of questions, just ask away. If you are interested in any of the topics, drop us an email. And I think we're all open, and it's very interesting to have your perceptions. You are a different, I'm talking for younger people, the different generation that works in a different way. I find it very interesting to work with the younger people, especially when we are talking here about communicating more science. And I think younger people are very much more comfortable maybe and can do it in a cheaper and quicker way, communicating science, being it trying to do some things on TikTok or something on Instagram, but communicating some research results. If you're interested, just get in touch, and for sure, I'm sure we can find something to involve you guys on.
Thank you, Christina. Final words, Anna?
No, I think I just agree with Christina. With we do need the young people. I know we all look very young, but we do need younger people than we do working with us and bringing especially new skills and new ideas, and this communication aspect is fundamental, and new ideas are always welcome. So just drop us a line if you want to not even if not work with us, but just chat. We here for that, and I'm sure the three of us are open to any suggestions and discussion with the fellow scientists from different areas and younger scientists, certainly.
Thank you. Katerina?
No, I'm not adding anything. Just if anyone has any questions, please send me an email as well. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you. And before, first of all, I want to thank the three, and Hilario, Katerina and Cristina Pita, the speakers, for your fantastic presentations and discussion. I want also to thank Tyler, thank you, Tyler, you just open your camera, for the setup together with Anna Sophia, setup of this webinar, for all the arrangements. This is the fourth series of science policies webinars from Alternet. I'm here also representing CESAM as a principal investigator at researcher at CESAM, and also the representative of CESAM at Alternet, but at the same time vice-chair of the Council of Alternet Association. So it is I'm very pleased to be here, to be able to share this session. Tyler, I give you the floor. I don't know if you want to announce the next webinar or the
next webinar hasn't been announced yet, but I'll keep you all in the loop when planning does develop. And in the meantime, we'll be putting the recording of this session up on the Alternet website, and I'll share the link with all of you so that you can have access to that.
So thank you very much. Hope to see you. In the next Alternet webinars. They are always co-shared with one of the members of the Alternet. For those that are attending this session and are not totally aware of what Alternet is, so you just, Tyler, would you mind to put the link of Alternet again and on the chat?
Yeah,
so that you can go to Alternet webpage and see all the partners and see and have access to the activities that are going on. And I ask the same question to Anna-Sophie, if you don't mind to put the link to CESAM, so attendees can also check a little bit more about one of the Alternet partners and more about where you also find the web pages of Christina, Anna, and Katerina. And from my side, I thank you all and hope to see you in the next webinar.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.